the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. In the opening discussion for Leadership Action, one of the two programs I run for the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber, we had business executives and social service providers around the table. Very quickly, the discussion revolved around the importance of public transit. From both sides of the equation, the issue was, how do employees who live near the center access the growing number of jobs on the periphery, along and beyond the I-275 Beltway? On the north side of the river, Metro has provided bus service for 42 years. Funded primarily by a City of Cincinnati earnings tax, the system historically has focused service on the downtown and inside the city limits in a hub and spoke model. Although the downtown is still the single largest job center, much of the job growth is on the metropolitan edge beyond the traditional service lines. I am joined this morning by Dwight Ferrell, who was appointed CEO and General Manager of Metro in early January. Mr. Ferrell began his career as a bus driver, moved up the ladder. He has held leadership positions in multimodal transit systems in Austin, Dallas, New Orleans, Philadelphia, and as the Deputy General Manager and CEO of MARTA in Atlanta. Most recently, he serves as the Deputy General Manager of Fulton County, Georgia. Welcome to Cincinnati.
Glad to be here.
Welcome to Newsmakers.
Glad to be here.
And as somebody who's been around, I love people who have been around and not just been in this place all their lives. How would you've been here for about 100 days, a little bit more. How would you evaluate where we are in the public transit question compared to the other cities that you know, and not just the ones you work in, but the ones that you know about? Where do we stand?
I think that we're further along than most. In your opening,
I think people would be surprised by that.
Oh, I think in your opening you talked about the fact that the larger community recognizes the importance of it and want to have a discussion about how it can expand to some extent to be able to get people to jobs. And I've been refreshed by that, and in fact that was one of the reasons that brought me here, because their transit systems, public transportation overall, is struggling in the whole funding area, and a lot of them wanting to serve beyond their particular service constraints. And so this is a good place to be, and it's very it's a hot topic right now, if you will, of public transportation in Cincinnati.
So how serious? I mean, I drew this image that Metro is very good if you're going downtown, and very good as long as you're sort of within the city limits. Move beyond those city limits into zone 2, 3, farther out. Service gets thinner. How important is it for the long-term success of Metro and/or / our region that changes?
I think it's very important for the region. I think that Metro is the facilitator, the provider of the service, but more important, I think it's more important for the region about getting people to jobs where they are. And whether they have to use public transportation out of necessity or by choice, I think is important for the region to be able to address it. And I also think that for people to recognize that public transportation is part of the economic engine that drives this region. So a robust public transportation network will certainly help fuel that growth.
You have recently, I don't know if it's the right word, is signed an agreement with the Economic Center at the University of Cincinnati to do an economic impact statement. What do you expect to get out of that we don't already sort of know?
Well, I think that what we want to be able to show is that whether you use Metro directly, there is still an economic benefit to you. Much like we, in our 401ks or investments or what have you, we may have stock in companies that we don't even know what they are or don't use their product, but we are looking for a return on our investment there. And so we want that study to show that the stakeholders who pay the earnings tax, who may not ever use Metro, and because we also get funding from the federal government, so we all pay federal taxes, we want people to understand that there's a return to them. It may be an indirect return to them, but a return to them, quantifiable return to them, so that they can see that a further investment is of value to them, beyond just a regular rider.
Most recently, you were in Atlanta, and with the MARTA system. How does, now Atlanta's a lot bigger than we are in terms of a region.
Yes.
Is MARTA truly a regional system? Is it funded differently, or how is it funded? And how well do you think it serves that region?
I think that MARTA is just, MARTA, there's a 5-county metropolitan area, metropolitan Atlanta area. Historically, MARTA has been funded by 2 counties within that area, Fulton and DeKalb.
2 counties?
2 counties. But the larger metropolitan area has not been part of that. They have decided to do things on their own. Most recently, this last fall, the voters in Clayton County elected to become part of MARTA and start paying the 1% sales tax. So there is that infusion and then that expansion of MARTA into that area. So it's starting to happen there because they have some of the same challenges here, except the traffic is is much more significant. It's a 5 or 6 million person metropolitan area, so it's pretty daunting. But they're starting to address the issues there, much like what we're talking about here, is how can they provide additional funding for public transportation in that region, because they recognize that it is also an economic engine. It's about access to jobs. There's lots of businesses relocate to Atlanta, and people got to get there.
We've, on this show, lots of places, we've been talking about public transit, Metro, for years. I care about this. Back in 2002, there was the Metro Moves plan, and we have a map that was used in Metro Moves that we can call up. And the discussion at that time always focused on, or primarily focused on, the idea of light rail. But part of that plan, and it was rejected by the voters, part of that plan was what I always thought was a very creative approach to the bus portion of a multimodal system, and thinking about how to deploy our bus resources differently than we traditionally have, that hub and spoke model that I used. And I think Metro has already gone down that path a little bit, but is that still the right way to be going, and diversifying how we use the bus routes and whatever?
I think it's how we diversify how we do it, not only bus routes, but even equipment size. One of the examples that I give often is Southwest Airlines uses a single plane, a single type of plane, a 747. There may be different lengths, but it's the same plane. And that works for them in terms of where they want to serve. Legacy carriers like American Airlines, Delta, and others have an array of planes from 50-passenger jets all the way up to 747s, because they will get into areas that Southwest can't go into, or has chosen not to go into for whatever, because it doesn't fit their business model. So what I see for us is, since 2012, there have been advances in a lot of areas, and I think for us to be able to serve this region, not only will we have to look at different routes, but also different equipment to get into some of the areas that are lower density, to get into some of the areas where the ridership may not be what it once was, but it's still necessary, and using smaller equipment to do that than what we currently have. So
more efficiently.
More efficiently. So I think that we've got to reinvent how we do business, and that's certainly one of the things that we want to start doing.
Is part of that to break the idea? I mean, so often in the traditional system, in order to get from one place to the other, both of which may be 10 miles away from the downtown, you had to go downtown and then transfer and go out. That crosstown traffic, which, by the way, in this city isn't easy by car a lot of times either.
That's true.
We're not so good at that. Is that part of what you're talking about too?
It is, but I also want to point out, in a lot of cities, it's difficult to get cross town, even by car. Because they're not necessarily laid out in just a true grid. But yes, providing cross-town service, basically we have to connect people from where they are to where they want to go.
Yep.
And so we'll have to be able to do that. And we also have to engage the millennials in how we reach them and provide service to them, because they want our product. So that's something else that we've got to do.
So how do you do that?
Well, that's a good question.
Neither of us are millennials.
No. But my youngest son is a millennial, and so he certainly has opened my minds to a lot of different things that I was not aware of. But I think that it's, whether it be through the use of technology, but I think we have to engage with them in a conversation, because the things that were important to you and I are not important to them. I would never dream of moving to a city and thinking I'll find a job when I get there, but millennials will. So it really is more of a quality of life kind of thing for them. At least that's been my observation. And it's also interesting to note that fewer of them even want to drive. Fewer of them are trying to get driver's licenses or registering for cars. There's studies that have shown that. And I think that's fascinating, because when I was a kid, I wanted a car.
And by the time you turned 16.
And by my 16th birthday, I was at the DMV.
Yep.
And I was telling my mother, it's time to go. And so yes, so I do understand, but it's different. And so I think that
is that also involved with changing the image of riding the bus?
Well, as I stated before, public transportation is an economic generator. It is. I oftentimes compare what we do in public transportation to the airline industry, because they move people by plane, we move people by buses. And so, but you have taken, like many of us have taken flights with people we didn't know, stuck in the middle seat between somebody who may have smelled bad or somebody who snored, and while we may not have liked it, and paid a lot of money for the ticket. But we took that flight because either we were trying to get to some business, or trying to get to a job interview, or trying to vacation, or whatever the case may be. Taking one of Metro's buses is the exact same thing. People want to use it to get to wherever it is that they need to go for whatever reason. So changing that image is not just for people who have to use it. We have a lot of people who use it because they want to.
Well, I know a couple days ago, somebody tried to ask you a question about the Metro and its responsibilities and relationship to the streetcar, and I heard the phrase, your mother didn't raise any dumb kids, and you sort of, but now I've got you cornered. So the streetcar is coming.
Yes.
It is, the tracks are going in.
Yes.
And we have an interesting situation here. We have some people very excited about this. We have Metro in a very practical mode of trying to figure out what they're going to do, how you're going to manage it and run it. And you've got a mayor who just despises the whole thing. So you're new to town. How do you get through that?
Well, you said that we are taking a practical approach about how to run it, and that's exactly where I am. The decision about the streetcar was made before I got here, and I know that it was a difficult and volatile conversation. But my responsibility as Chief Executive Officer for Metro, and our responsibility as an organization is to operate it, and that's where we are. And we don't get caught up in the politics of it. Ours is a single focus to work with the city of Cincinnati to help finish with the construction, do the startup, and create a successful system, period.
Have you dealt with streetcars in any of your past situations?
Yes, I have. In Atlanta, I was the project director for a period of time, and during that time we were responsible for purchasing the cars, selecting
So at the rollout phase, in that early,
actually
sort of similar to where we are right now.
Well, actually, I was involved in it from the grant application, grant award, the design, the selection, and purchase of the rail vehicles, station selection, design.
And is that in operation now in Atlanta?
Yes, it is.
how's it going?
Well, I haven't followed it, quite frankly. I left the project in 2012, but I know it's operational. I think it came online December 31st of this year. I'm told
So it's really new.
It's really new, but it is. I'm assuming it's doing what it's supposed to do, and all of these new projects have their challenges. I've been involved in more than one, and they all have their challenges. But we, from an operational perspective, kind of filter out the politics and stay on task about a successful startup.
Not always easy to do.
But it's fun.
Is it fun? Okay.
But it's fun.
I'm glad you're smiling.
It's fun.
Okay, you've been here 100 days.
Yeah,
Good.
well, I'm gonna have a blast with it.
Okay.
I'm gonna have a good time.
And we're going to have you back as Metro develops and as the Metro multimodal streetcar process develops. Hope you'll be back to Newsmakers any number
I'm looking
of
forward
times.
to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Stay tuned. The city of Cincinnati is one of the 5 highest child poverty rates in the United States. We have known that for over a decade, but now a local coalition of churches is committed to doing something about it. Join me. Welcome back. The statistics are staggering. Based on a 2012 data gathered by the Children's Defense Fund, Cincinnati ranks 2nd in the country, behind only Detroit, in the percentage of children living in poverty. The estimate is 53%. This general status has been known for a decade or more and has not improved. The excellent reporting of the Cincinnati Enquirer last Sunday has stirred the Amos Project to look for appropriate responses under the banner of a coalition for a just county. Amos is a federation of about 40 local religious congregations of various traditions, as well as some labor unions that have worked together for almost 2 decades. I am joined now by the Reverend Damon Lynch III, the senior pastor of New Prospect Baptist Church in Roselawn. New Prospect is one of those almost 40 congregations that makes up the Amos Coalition. Welcome back to Newsmakers. It's been a while.
It has. Yeah, it's good to see you.
A lot of people responded to the article that was in the paper last Sunday. On Monday, I received a notice from Troy Jackson, the head of the Amos Project, announcing this series of conversations, which we'll talk about in a minute. In one sense, this isn't news, but it does seem like maybe people are paying attention in a different way.
Well, I would hope so. You're right. In one sense, it's not news. I think for people who paid no attention, it struck them. For those of us who have lived it for the last 25, 50 years, it wasn't news. And for those of us who have been working on the issue of childhood poverty and just poverty in general, in Hamilton County, it wasn't news. But it was stark, the way the Enquirer, and it was personal. And I think the fact that it was so personal, it just made people hopefully motivated to action.
Good storytelling, good reporting.
Sure. I mean, we're in a city that, United Way raises millions of dollars every year. And yet the statistics get worse. So at some point we have to question, is what have we been doing, is it effective? And should we keep doing the same thing? Is there time now to do something different? And so for me, you have to ask yourself, because the poor become invisible. I spent 25 years in Over the Rhine, and I watched the population. When I got there, it was 15,700, declined to about 8,000. So I watched 7,000 people be moved out. I'm watching now how there's no room for the poor in Over the Rhine. It's just so interesting. It was once the most serviced community probably in America, and now that it's changing, all the service providers have to leave. So the drop-in center has to leave. The City Gospel Mission has to leave. Tender Mercies, everybody, now it's like everybody out of the pool. If you're helping poor people, we don't want you here anymore. So the poor become more marginalized, pushed to the edges, pushed to Queensgate somewhere. We have to ask ourselves, how does the streetcar help the poor? How does the banks help the poor? All these things that we are so excited about, all these things that the New York Times will write about, and people outside of Cincinnati will say, oh, we're doing such a great job, but underneath that, you have a 53% poverty rate among children in our county. Something has to change.
Well, you know, there's besides the United Way, which is the big pool
Right.
of money, there's a lot of organizations out there. You know, you can everything from CityLink to St. Vincent
Right.
de Paul to Interfaith Hospitality Network
Right.
to Cincinnati Works. You know, all of this.
It is.
Now you're going to launch this series of discussions on the Saturday mornings
Right.
of May at your church
Right.
under the Amos banner. What realistically? I mean, I don't think we need another not-for-profit. I don't think that's the answer here. What do you think what are the right questions to be asking?
Well, I think number one, you need an ongoing conversation to figure out what are the right questions and then what are some of the right solutions. I'm part of a group out of Northwestern University that works on community development, which basically says that servicing people does not make them whole. And so, again, you have all these social service agencies that do, you know, what they do, but if we were all as effective as we thought we were, then we wouldn't have the problem we now have. If servicing people made them whole, then Over the Rhine would have been whole 30 years ago, because we had every social service known to humankind in one neighborhood, and yet we were still considered one of the worst neighborhoods in Cincinnati. You have to figure out, how do we really empower people, and you have to figure out, how do we change the system. You know, we make the mistake of thinking you can change the system by changing the rulers, so it's always about who you vote for and who sits in what seat. You can't change the system by changing the rulers. You have to change the rules. And so we have to say, if we're going to invest in development, let's invest in development of people. And if it's going to be community development, it has to be community economic development, which means if you're going to spend $50 million in a community for whatever it is, you have to make sure the people who live there benefit from that, not just from new amenities, but from the job training, the opportunities, the work that's going to take place.
So do you see this as fundamentally a economic issue, and that therefore means that the business community's got to be involved in a different way than it is, and it's not so much the social service community that's the heart of this question, but the business community?
It's both, and we saw that after 2001. The business community, the entire city of Cincinnati galvanized so that what happened in 2001 would never, hopefully never happen again. And so Cincinnati Can was established, and everybody came together. The business community was at the table along with the community to figure out how do we move forward as a city. And I think we did a pretty good job moving forward from 2001. Now we're faced with a new crisis. It's not new, but it's in our face now. And I think we have to say, as a city, we're going to change that. The numbers are going to come down. Quick story, there's a church in Over the Rhine, Nash Trinity. And some years ago, the pastor there, Sherry Gale, said, Damon, can you help us? She said, we feed about 500 people every Sunday morning. She said, but we only worship about 20. So every Sunday morning we feed 500, we worship 20. Now, if you're interested in numbers, and you can get excited, we feed 500 every week and think you're doing a great work. We worship 20. What she wanted to do was figure out, how do we flip the number? To know we're really effective is when we're worshiping 500 and only feeding 20, because the need for feeding people has gone down. And so we did an innovative project down there, which was real simple. We talked to the men and women that they were feeding every Sunday, just to find out what were their gifts, their skills, their assets, because we understand that your gift is the key that unlocks the door to being part of community. And we found men and women that they were feeding every Sunday who were supremely gifted. A lot of them were cooks, and here we are feeding people who can cook. And so if you change the paradigm, allow people that you're servicing to use their gifts, then they become part of the solution. So it takes time. Community building is harder work than service provision. I mean, I can open up a soup kitchen tomorrow. That's simple. I can give out clothing tomorrow. But building community, it takes more work, but it's the necessary work we have to do. And that's what Amos, as well as National Action Network, we're going to be coming together every Saturday to find some solutions.
Okay. I want to make sure people know about where to go for this, because these conversations are going to take place every Saturday morning at your church, New Prospect in Roselawn. And here we go. We got it on the screen.
Okay.
1580 Summit Road. And from 10:30 in the morning till noon.
Right.
And we're going to do this every Saturday morning during May, not just one time come together.
Every Saturday in May. It may even extend beyond that. And this is the old Jewish Community Center.
The old, the old Jewish Community Center.
Right.
Everybody knows where that is.
We're also going to look at issues of justice in Hamilton County.
Okay. I got to get out of here.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week. Meet the men and the women shaping our community for a better region and a better future. Thank you very much.